At the very beginning, we meet Michael Carter, a man whose life was forever changed after a devastating accident left him in a wheelchair. His wife, Jessica, looked at him with nothing but contempt. Not long after, she left with another man, convinced Michael was broken for good. What Jessica never realized was that her husband had secretly built up a fortune of $100 million, earned from decades of relentless hard work. While she paraded her new life, Michael quietly rebuilt his own, through therapy, determination, and a company that proudly bore his name. Years later, when Jessica saw him again, walking tall, powerful, and untouchable, the tears streaming down her face revealed that she had lost more than she ever imagined. Before diving deeper, the narrator takes a pause, asking first-time viewers to hit the subscribe button, reminding everyone that their support makes it possible to share more stories like this. Michael Carter had always been a man who trusted in tomorrow. Every extra hour, every hard-earned dollar, every drop of sweat, he saved it like a farmer planting seeds for a harvest he might never see. For 2 decades, he worked grueling double shifts at the plant. The pounding of machines, the sting of grease, the ache in his shoulders, none of it broke him. Neighbors often gossiped, whispering, "That guy never spends a cent. What's he even saving for?" But Michael knew. He was saving for stability, for dignity, for a future where his wife Jessica would never have to worry. Most nights, he came home late, boots heavy, hands trembling, yet always wearing a quiet smile. Jessica sometimes looked at him with gratitude, other times with indifference, but Michael never asked for praise, only for patience. Then came that night. Rain hammered the windshield as Michael drove home, his headlights cutting through the dark. He was exhausted, too exhausted, but he kept going. Out of nowhere came a screech, flashing lights, and a crushing collision. Silence followed. When Michael opened his eyes in the hospital, nothing felt the same. His legs refused to move. He pleaded with them to lift, even an inch, but nothing happened. The sterile air smelled of antiseptic, the fluorescent lights hummed above, and then the doctor's words shattered what hope he had left: he would be in a wheelchair permanently. At first, Michael thought he could adapt. But the months that followed were brutal. He was laid off from his job under the excuse of downsizing. The truth was, they couldn't see past the chair. Bills stacked up like bricks on his chest. The home that once felt warm now echoed with tension. Jessica's sighs grew sharper, her footsteps impatient across the kitchen floor. Neighbors noticed. Sitting on porches with coffee mugs in hand, they whispered, "Such a shame, he worked his whole life. And look at her now, she sure doesn't look happy." Michael always heard. At night, he rolled himself to the window, staring at the glow of the street lamp, trying to remind himself he was still a man, still alive, still worth something. But deep inside, cracks were spreading. Jessica hardly touched him anymore. She spoke as though he was a burden instead of a husband. One night, when Michael reached for her hand, she pulled away and muttered under her breath, "This isn't the life I signed up for." The silence that followed was louder than any storm. Michael, once a man who believed in tomorrow, now sat in the shadows of his own home, wondering if his wife would ever see him as more than just broken. Days slipped into weeks, and weeks into months. Michael clung to routine, but each morning reminded him of the cruel truth: his legs no longer served him. The chair creaked beneath him as he wheeled into the kitchen, his palms raw from pushing the rims, his pride worn thinner than the welcome mat under him. Jessica's smile had long since vanished. She moved through the house like a stranger who didn't belong there, slamming cabinet doors louder than necessary, leaving dishes half-washed in the sink. One evening, when Michael tried to help set the table, the plates slipped from his shaking hands and shattered on the floor. He froze, apologizing, but Jessica's face twisted with fury. "Michael, I can't do this forever," she snapped, her voice sharper than the shards at his feet. "I didn't marry this." Her words lingered in the air long after she stormed out, cutting deeper than the accident ever had. Michael sat frozen, staring at his own reflection in the shattered glass on the floor, wondering when he had stopped being Jessica's husband and instead became her burden. By then, even the neighbors had caught on. Two men on the block, leaning under the hood of a car one afternoon, muttered to each other. "You hear about Jessica? Always out with that guy Ryan, showing off in some shiny car." "Yeah, poor Michael. Loyal his whole life, and look at her now." Michael didn't need their gossip. He could already feel the distance. Jessica's clothes had grown flashier, her perfume stronger. She came home late, sometimes not at all. Then one night, the truth came crashing down. Michael rolled into the living room and saw Jessica packing her bags. Her face wasn't angry, it was cold, final. Behind her stood Ryan Mitchell, leaning casually in the doorway, his watch glinting under the dim lamp. "I can't waste my life like this," Jessica said flatly, barely glancing at him. "I need someone who can actually take care of me." Michael's throat locked up. His chest felt like stone. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Jessica didn't wait. She dragged her suitcase out, slipped her arm into Ryan's, and the click of her heels on the porch steps echoed into the night, until even that faded, leaving Michael in silence. For days, the house felt like a tomb, empty, cold, suffocating. He caught himself listening for Jessica's footsteps, her laugh, even her sighs. But the only sounds were the low hum of the fridge and the soft whisper of the wind through the curtains. Alone, Michael sank deeper into himself. The man who once believed in tomorrow now questioned whether tomorrow was even worth waiting for. But Jessica never knew, no one knew, that Michael wasn't as broken as he looked. Behind the quiet window, behind the wheelchair in that empty house, sat a man who had saved for decades. Nearly $100 million, guarded quietly. Money he never bragged about. Not to his friends, not even to his wife. Jessica thought she'd left a crippled man with nothing. But Michael knew better. This storm wouldn't last forever. One day, he'd rise again. His mornings began before the sun. Sitting on the edge of his bed, palms pressed to his thighs, he counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3. He slid on a glove, rolled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, and studied himself in the mirror. His eyes looked tired, yes, but steady. And that steadiness became his plan. He opened an old notebook and drew 3 columns: cash, skills, people. No speeches, no miracles, just math. 20 years in factories had taught him how supply lines worked, how safety protocols failed, how downtime and sloppy inspections bled companies dry. And he knew how to fix it. From his living room, he registered a small company, Carter Industrial Services. His office was a laptop on a shaky desk, a second-hand printer, and a ringtone that startled him every time it buzzed. He hired 2 freelancers, an inspector and a scheduler, paid them fair and always on time. "We do small jobs, but we do them right," Michael told them quietly. "No promises we can't keep." The first client came from an old supervisor who still respected him. A small plant drowning in rusted valves and paperwork chaos. Michael arrived in a van branded with his company logo, though he didn't drive it himself. Clipboard balanced on his knees, eyes sharp, he said little and listened more. He spotted the problems right away: missed checks, sloppy inventory, panic-driven shifts. He grabbed a marker, drew a simple grid on the whiteboard. The squeak of the lines filled the room, and the supervisor's face lit up as if Michael had handed him oxygen. 2 weeks, Michael said steadily. "You'll see the difference." And they did. It wasn't magic, just order, bins labeled properly, schedules that didn't break workers, machines that finally stopped whining. Costs went down. Productivity went up. The manager shook Michael's hand and quietly mentioned his name to someone else at another plant. That whisper traveled. And by the 3rd month, Michael's living room couldn't hold the company anymore. Michael eventually leased a modest office on the ground floor, nothing fancy, but it had a clean ramp that didn't squeal when rolled over. The place smelled of fresh paint and coffee, with a radio humming softly in the background. He kept the front door cracked open so his team felt his presence without the weight of it. Every invoice went out on time. Every contractor was paid before they had to ask. Word spread quickly. The man in the chair runs a tight ship. On lunch breaks, people outside would chat. Two couriers swapping boxes once muttered, "That Carter guy, quiet killer. His clients swear by him. Isn't he in a wheelchair? Yeah. And he's moving like a train." Michael overheard one of those comments once, smiled into his paper cup, and went right back to his numbers. Therapy had become the other half of his life. Cold floors. The sting of disinfectant. A metronome clicking while he gripped the parallel bars. His knuckles turned white, shoulders trembling. The therapist nudged his hips by fractions. Weight through the heel. Breathe. Sweat rolled into his collar as his breath came in sharp bursts. One session he managed to stand for 9 seconds. A week later, 12. He logged each second like income on a ledger. No clapping. Just a small nod and a towel across his face. At night, he wheeled quiet laps through the office, studying maintenance logs, marking patterns with a dull pencil. Contracts kept piling in, a regional bakery line, then a plastics plant, then even a municipal water facility with alarms that screamed false warnings at 2 a.m. His crew rotated on calm schedules. He always called foremen by their first names. "We're not heroes," he told them. "We're reliable. Reliability pays." Months passed. The chair squeaked less because he'd learned to oil it himself. The books balanced without stress. Payroll was never late. He even added health insurance for his team. When the email went out, his employees stared at it like it was too good to be true. Therapy kept evolving. Braces. Black bands tugging at his ankle. He practiced shifting weight without clenching his jaw. Then one quiet afternoon, with the room still and the clock indifferent, Michael gripped the bars, steadied himself, and moved his left foot the width of a credit card. The therapist didn't cheer. She only whispered, "Again." And he did. Twice. When he sat down, chest heaving, a laugh slipped out. Not a loud laugh, just the kind that feels like air finally finding space. He didn't tell a soul. He preferred the privacy of progress. Outside the office, a pair of temp workers smoked by the curb. "Heard he's loaded now." "Nah, man, he just runs it smart." Michael passed them, nodded, and held the door open. A small courtesy, but one that carried weight. "We're building something here. Don't jinx it." Quarter by quarter, Carter Industrial Services shed the small label. Vendors no longer haggled, they wanted long-term contracts. A banker even invited him out for coffee. Michael declined the loan but shook the man's hand. One evening, long after everyone else had left, under the faint buzz of the exit sign, Michael tried again. No bars this time. Just a desk edge within reach. He placed his right foot forward, slow as the hand of a clock. Then the left. 2 steps. He sat back down carefully, lowered his head, and covered his face with both hands. No fireworks. No applause. Just the quiet sound of a man reclaiming himself, 1 inch at a time. "Tomorrow," he thought, wiping his eyes, "we go again." Meanwhile, Jessica's new life glittered on the surface. Ryan Mitchell had the swagger, flashy cars, sharp suits, restaurant reservations with her name on the guest list. He whispered promises over champagne glasses, called her "darling" in front of strangers, and made her feel like she'd finally stepped into the life she thought she deserved. But gold flakes fast when the paint is thin. Within months, Jessica started noticing the cracks. The cars weren't always his. The dinners grew fewer, the tabs heavier. Ryan's phone rang too often with angry voices on the other end. She noticed how he dodged her eyes when bills came, how his cologne covered sweat. She shoved the doubts aside, convincing herself she had upgraded. But unease gnawed at her anyway. Then one night, Ryan was gone. His suits vanished from the closet, his watch box emptied. On the counter sat a note with only 7 words. "I can't carry you anymore." Just like that, Jessica was abandoned. Jessica had traded a man who had loved her through sweat, through years, through storms, for someone who only kept her around while it was convenient. Now broke and desperate, she drifted through the same streets where she once flaunted her new life. At the grocery store, whispers clung to her like shadows. 2 women by the fruit stand whispered, "That's Jessica," thought she made it big. Look at her now. Life always comes back around, doesn't it? The gossip stung worse than hunger. Days later, walking through downtown, Jessica froze in her tracks. Across the street, stepping out of a gleaming black car surrounded by sharp-suited staff, was Michael. But not the Michael she had left behind. This Michael stood tall, steady, confident, his frame strong again, his expression sharp with determination. His tailored suit wasn't loud, but it commanded respect. When he turned, his employees waited silently for his word before moving. Behind him, the company logo, Carter Industrial Services, shone proudly on the glass building. Jessica's breath hitched. Her knees weakened, and she clutched a lamppost for balance. She stared at the man she had discarded, watching him roll fate in the opposite direction. She stumbled across the street in a haze, tears spilling before words even formed. "Michael. I didn't know you could walk again." He looked at her. For a brief instant, old memories flickered, the dinners, the laughter before life turned cruel. But his eyes carried no warmth anymore, only a calm she couldn't pierce. "Yes," he said simply. His voice wasn't angry, wasn't vengeful. It was just the truth. Jessica collapsed to her knees right there on the pavement. Pedestrians slowed, phones half-raised, murmurs spreading through the crowd. "That's his ex, isn't it?" someone whispered. "Yeah. She ditched him when he was down. Look at him now." The crowd didn't sneer at Michael. They looked at him with respect. The shame was hers alone. Jessica begged, her voice cracking, mascara running down her cheeks. "I was wrong. I was scared. I didn't know you'd." But Michael didn't need to hear the rest. He walked past her, his employees falling in step behind him. The polished thud of shoes against concrete drowned out her sobs. For the first time in years, Michael didn't feel the weight of being left behind. He felt the clarity of a man who had survived the storm and risen higher. Jessica reached for his sleeve as he passed, but her fingers caught only air. He never slowed. He never looked back. That night, as the city lights glowed against the glass walls of his office, Michael stood by the window. His reflection showed a man who had been broken, yes, but never destroyed. The wheelchair in the corner reminded him of the journey. The company logo on the wall reminded him of the victory. He whispered softly to himself, almost like a prayer. "Storms don't break you. They reveal who was never meant to stand beside you." And somewhere out in the dark, Jessica wept alone, learning the true cost of betrayal. Because Michael hadn't just learned to walk again. He had risen beyond her reach. Loyalty is proven in storms, not sunshine. Michael's rise proved that betrayal can never defeat a determined spirit. Would you have stood by him, or walked away like Jessica? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more powerful stories.